What's up, everybody? Adam Maness here. In this video, we're going to learn all about the three-zone concept for solo piano. It's one of the most useful concepts there is on solo piano. There is a PDF with this video, so make sure to download that so you can follow along as we get to work. Let's get started. What is the three-zone concept? Well, the three-zone concept is something that's been around almost as long as there's been a piano keyboard. It's where we break our two hands up into more than two different zones, right? So we actually add almost like a third hand here. So zone one is usually reserved for this top part of the right hand. It's what we use to play the melody. The pinky finger, the fourth finger of the right hand, we can use that to play the melodic devices that are usually on top of the rest of the chords and everything else. Zone two is down here, the fifth finger and fourth finger of the left hand. It's usually reserved for the bass line, right? For the root of the chord, the fifth of the chord, that moving bass line. And then in the middle, we can break up the chords and everything else, including counter melodies and things, between the two hands. So this sort of thumb, second finger, third finger of both the right and left hands becomes its own third and sometimes fourth hand. So sometimes you might even have four zones going. We're going to keep it really basic here for this beginner tutorial here of just having the third zone there split between the hands right there in the middle. Isn't that amazing? So what does this sound like in practice? In practice, it has this very alive quality to it where it doesn't get too repetitive. It's not just, walking bass lines or just chords. It has kind of every element. It's almost like putting the orchestra on the piano. It sounds something like this. Splitting everything up there right in the middle. Isn't that great? And what the beauty of this is you can do this with any tune. Like once you kind of understand how to separate out these concepts, again, if we look at our zones, that the melody goes over here, like in the top half in zone one, and the bass goes in zone two, and then we can do all kinds of little counter melodies and chords in the middle between the two hands. Once you understand that, you can do this on any tune. So we're going to do a very restrictive practice version of this over the changes for the A section of There Is No Greater Love, right? Jam session standard, you probably know. So the first thing we want to do, you can do this with a regular melody, but I think it can be helpful to break this down. Just shout out to Jeffrey Keyser for having this pretty note concept in his Keys to Jazz piano course here at Open Studio. Because it's kind of been a game changer for teaching this three-zone concept. So instead of playing the melody here to There Is No Greater Love, which we can do, we want to break it down even more basic, more simple, so that we can understand the concept easier. So here, we're going to do a prescribed melody. Every chord gets its own melody, and that melody is always going to be the ninth of the chord. So here on B flat, we have the 9 on top. Right? And then we have the root down there in zone 2 on the blue, as you see. And then we throw in a 3-note voicing in the middle, again, with that third hand split between the left and right hands. Right? And then we go to the E flat 7, same thing. Right? The 9 on top, 9 of E flat, and then the root on zone 2 there. And then we split the chord between the hands. A flat, you got the 9 on top, B flat, root on the bottom, split the chord between the two hands. Right? This is the very first way we can work on the three zones. We're going to do 2 other ways. So we'll do three ways to work on it in total. But this way, I think, is one of the most useful to really be able to comp for yourself, have some hand and finger independence, get that third hand going. So the 9th on top, that's arbitrary. That's just something I picked. You can do the 5th, you can do the root, but picking sort of like a degree of the chord and then just changing that with each chord is a nice way to get to know what are my voicing options when the melody is the 9, or when the melody is the root, or when the melody is the 5th, or when the melody is the 3rd. Practicing those restrictively is great. And then when you get to playing a melody, you've already done the work of like, oh, I know kind of what to do here when the melody is the 7th, or the melody is the, you know what I mean? Like practicing them in a restrictive way can be very, very fun. It also helps you to be able to find those notes here in the range of the keyboard. So let's try this very first one here. I have some suggested voicings there. I also have a suggested rhythm. If you're kind of new to this concept, this rhythm is just a basic rhythm you can stick to. If you're more advanced and you have no problem finding these notes, the 3rd, the 7th, and the pretty note, then you can play some more rhythms. So that reminds me, the voicings I have here are a very simple formula as well. You wouldn't necessarily have to follow this formula. In fact, you can do whatever you want for the voicings. But I have the third, seventh, and one extra pretty note somewhere here in these 3-note voicings. So there are always 3 notes. There's always the third, there's always the seventh, and then there's usually one extra note that's the pretty note, the 5th, the 9th, the 13th, the 11th, you know, the usual suspects for pretty notes. Let's hear what this sounds like. We're going to go very, very slow here as we work through this, because I know a lot of you, this might be the first time you're practicing something like this. So let's just go through. I've given you the first 4. After the G7, it's up to you, right? We have the 9 root. It's up to you to find the chord, the 3-note chord where you get 1 note with your left hand, 2 notes with your right, and it's all in that middle third zone, right? That third hand. Let's try it. 1, 2, 3, and... Nice and easy. Just finding those middle chords there with that third hand. Again, usually the third, seventh plus one other pretty note, but it could be whatever you want. One note here, an important part of this is dynamics, how loudly we play each of the zones. And so I like naming the melody 1, the bass 2, and the chord 3, because that can be the hierarchy of how loudly we want to place everything. So in other words, the melody always comes through on top. Next loudest should be the bass line. And then just a whisper, right? Just a mist in the air can be the chords. Like, notice the difference between this. And this. You know what I mean? Like, having those chords just be supportive, right? We have to have that kind of independence. But when they're supportive, it's game on. So that's the first way we can work on it. Again, we're working on There Is No Greater Love right here, the first 2 A sections. The second way is to put all of the chords in the right hand. I love this way because this really frees up our left hand. And now that we have the left hand freed up, it can do a more active bass line. It can do that 2-feel half-note bass line. You don't have to go crazy, but you can just do a little more, right? You can sort of do a call and response with the left hand. That kind of thing. We're comping, again, we have that hand independence, that finger independence, so that the chord is quieter. Even though it's the same hand, we want those notes to be just a whisper, just the mist in the air. It's like how I like to think about it. I've got the sharp 11 in there for the A flat 7 and the G7. I love that voicing so much. And again, if this is all very new to you and the hand independence is tough, the finger independence is tough, just keep it simple and just play this very simple rhythm. Again, after the G7, I let you off to do however you want here to find your way with the C7, the F7, and the next part. Let's try it. Let's try this version. 1, 2, 3, and... some independence to anticipate that chord while you're playing that half note. So try it. See if you can add a half note. It could be either the 1 or the 5 of the chord. You don't have to get fancier than that. It's the root or the 5th. Just like that. or half step slides there. So that's our second version of the three zone concept, where we comp with our right hand, right? So we make sure that we can have some space with the left hand. Again, you could probably already see that just having these two gives us all this flavor, where we can have these big chords, split between the two hands. But then if we want to kind of do some other stuff, like if we want to really kind of get a little busier with our left hand, we have that option. We could also, by the way, comp with just the left hand. Like whatever we do with any of the third zone, so if we're comping with just the right, we could also do with just the left to free up our right hand. It works great for soloing and stuff. Again, takes some hand and finger independence, but it just takes doing it. It really just takes practicing it. One more thing I want to practice. This is going to blow your mind, I think. So we can now add counter melodies, right, with that middle line. And again, this could be done with either hand. I have the right hand here as our example, but as you see, and again, dynamics come into play here, right? You want your melody to still be on top, right? You want it to be the loudest thing that you play. And these melodies, these counter melodies, need to be just underneath. Here's my examples here. But you can do whatever you want. Becomes fun here. So let's do some restrictive practice with this. Let's try it. I give you some examples up to the G7, then you take it from there. Again, we're going to keep a little 2-feel bass in the left hand. 1, 2, 3, and still have the 9th on top. Connecting the dots here, half notes in the bass, just root and 5, really. You don't have to do much more than that. And then every once in a while you can connect those dots. Like that. Just these counter melodies, whatever you want to improvise in the middle. When you combine all of those, you get that example that I played from All the Things You Are in the beginning. You get that. You get just a freedom, right? Where it's not just, a bass line and a melody, or just comping chords like there's a rhythm section here, right? All those things you can use as part of this, but having this command and this finger independence, this hand independence of the three zones, that's what makes great solo pianists. Pianists like I'm thinking like Art Tatum, Oscar Peterson, Kenny Barron, one of my favorites. Hank Jones uses these similar concepts. Like everybody really does. I mean, this is part of being a solo pianist, is knowing how to have more than just two hands, right? We get 3, we get 4 hands going. So that's it for today. Thank you so much, folks. Until next time.